if you're in the upper echelons of things, and you pal around with the School of Nursing, then you know our guest. But actually, let's just go around so that you also get everybody. You all know who I am through, if nothing else, constant email proddings. So, Pat?
Oh, Pat Fairfield, Dartmouth Communication Studies.
Lindsay Sabatino, the director of the Digital Act Studio.
Brandy Probst, I coordinate Foundations for Learning.
Brenda Blevins, English. Which sorry, like most people. Name. Sorry. Sorry, it's been a very busy few weeks before I got an email to that effect when I realized I had forgotten last week's meeting. But no, my name is Joyce Clapp. I wear lots of hats at UNCG, as most of y'all do. But the relevant one at this moment is I have a dual appointment as a lecturer in the Sociology Department and the Liberal Studies Department. And specifically, the Liberal Studies Department is the one that uses the e-portfolios.
I'm Lynn Llewellyn from the School of Nursing, and I'm not a member of this community. I saw it on the email and thought, we've got 2 master's concentrations that are using e-portfolios. We're 100% online, and so I thought we ought to have a representative. So it may not always be me, but it's me today. Thank you for letting me.
And actually, Lynn's presence here is really helpful because I have started to get, and I'm sharing with Chantel, so we're kind of assembling this little list of people in the network, that it turns out that as people are finding out about our activity, people are coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, my program's using e-portfolios at some level. And this is enormously beneficial because we're going to get to learn from experienced colleagues, like what tends to work, what doesn't, what are some wise ways of putting together e-portfolios, even to the point of hopefully perhaps being able to take a peek at some sample e-portfolios to understand how those materialize. What platform are you using?
Well, we have 2 concentrations that are using it. I work with the nursing education concentration. We're just starting. Mm-hmm. The nursing administration concentration has been doing it for a few years. They're using Live Binder.
Okay.
Because they needed something that could be taken once the student graduates, that wasn't like tied to UNCG that they couldn't access anymore.
Is it very complicated?
They say, I haven't seen it, but they say it's not. The limitation of it is there's a free version that will mostly fit their needs, but then if they want to upload any videos, it's not big enough, so they have to then pay for another version, which they said is not too much, but I don't know how much.
Good.
But I can find out that information. They like it.
Good. Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of these, there's a wonderful term for this, premium, where it's like you get decent basic features, but to get the premium features that are probably what you really need for a vigorous e-portfolio, you have to pay for. And there are a number of tools like that, not necessarily designed specifically for e-portfolios, but one that I am actually in the process of signing up for my own personal webpage is Wix. It's a good web construction tool. It uses highly sophisticated coding so that you don't have to know anything. It's just drop and drag. The problem is that you do have intrusive ads if you don't pay for the premium version, and you have less file space.
How about Weebly?
Weebly is a public domain.
It's a good one.
And it's a good one. It's actually the preferred platform I've found, it seems, at the high school level when they have to do those sorts of things. A lot of high schools that, and I hear this from my work with the Holocaust educators statewide, a lot of high schools are putting stuff on Weebly.
We use it in our ISL. Laura and I are using it there.
Okay.
They're freshmen, and we're using it.
And of course, that's part of the key. If you're going to use an e-portfolio platform, if it's a program-wide requirement, critically important for that to start as early as possible, which is why Brandy and Jolanda's presence in this project are especially important, because that could be their first exposure. And we also have another I hesitate to call her guest because she's definitely always part of the community. But Bonnie, if you want to kind of.
I'm sorry.
No, just as.
Oh. Missed the question.
Yeah.
I'm Bonnie Yarborough. I'm a fellow with the FTLC working on TAC issues, but my main thing here is just to be a fly on the wall because Jenny Simon and I are integrating our ISL CST course and have an e-portfolio assignment. So I'm trying to just absorb and work that, make sure that that's complementary in my course.
And also, Bunny has a great deal of knowledge of portfolio-based pedagogy, which is sort of, at the center of those of us who have a background in composition, or in my case, possibly decomposition. But do you know everybody around the table here?
No, I know.
I know you don't know that person.
Never seen her before.
Okay, quick run
Never
through
seen this
again,
one.
and we'll see if your stories match.
Actually, I think I know
So-
everybody except.
I'm Joyce Clapp. I'm a lecturer in the sociology department and liberal studies.
Okay, great. Hi, Joyce.
Okay. All right, we've got three things, and this is, and like everything else when we have these learning community gatherings, if you have something that is emerging as a need for us to discuss and kind of get collective advice on, please contribute that, because that, our agenda is driven by our shared pedagogical concerns. So those are kind of the three things that chronologically seem to be important, and they might not make sense the way that I phrase them because I'm caught up in all sorts of technical jargon-esque things because I am now completing my third tenure review, promotion review actually in all three cases, and I've been writing about different people's research agendas, and the esoterica is like weird. But let me also do another plea, please, if you haven't done so already, post any e-portfolio related materials on the clearly marked discussion board on our Blackboard site. And in fact, not only is it clearly marked, but it is the very first discussion board, so it's very easy to find. Just go straight into discussions, what's been done so far is just post file attachments. What you might do also in the contents of the discussion board, the little box you have, if there's something you might want to call our attention to, say, what do you think about this aspect of this assignment, or I'd like some help with this, please do put that in there, because then that can help to drive some of our collective work to make sure that we're learning from each other and to some degree are on the same page with how we're defining e-portfolios relative to the students. Okay. We're not going to get any sort of scientific or social scientific controls with this, really, but if we can just help each other clarify expectations, that's going to be useful. Okay. All right. Also, there's a money issue, Lindsay, I wanted to discuss with you, and it's actually possibly a good one. So, all right, first, tagging assignments for the e-portfolio. Yeah, no, that is an incentive. It's but we've discovered the leprechaun, and so there's a little trickle of copper pieces. Yeah, but. Tagging assignments for the e-portfolio, it seems like a really mechanical nuts and bolts thing, but one of the things we need to explore is that we need to make it clear to students what the expectations are to include in the e-portfolio. And obviously, that probably would be indicated at first on the syllabus, just at least with the assignments marked. But how about within the individual assignment guidelines, okay? And so far, what I've started doing is just, not that this is by any means a model or anything, it's just to get the discussion started, is the very first thing in the assignment, is just a note, and you'll see an example of that, I believe, in the stuff that I posted on the discussion board, is just a note saying that work products related to this assignment are eligible for inclusion in your e-portfolio. And the reason I'm doing that is that you want the e-portfolio to be a deliberate construction of material. And if you don't start tagging what's eligible for inclusion, you're just going to get the kitchen sink, or perhaps even more likely, if they want to take a minimalist approach, not enough to actually demonstrate their learning. So kind of the question that's driving this for us as teachers is, what are the sorts of things that are going to be most suitable for demonstrating those competencies in the rubric? Okay. Now, I'm already finding that students have a real tough time thinking outside the box. They think, well, critical thinking, I'll put my papers in there. Well, they have a major presentation with a companion paper coming up, okay? And so I have on there, well, the video of your presentation. First of all, you may create a video of your presentation. If so, you're responsible for all the technology. I've got 40 students in the class, I'm not going to do. But the video is eligible for inclusion in the e-portfolio. Now, the interesting thing is, if they want to do that, they're going to have to figure out how to process that as an example of critical thinking. Okay? Written communication might be a stretch on that one, but you know, what is going to be the work product? And this is a very interesting kind of discussion that might well be within the territory of the Digital Act Studio as one of the sorts of things where, okay, what would be judicious to include? Do you want the entire 15-minute presentation? Or the answer is no for several reasons, not the least of which is storage capacity of your platform. But the sort of question that they can help with, which portions of this presentation would provide the best evidence of my working toward this competency? And I know to some degree it's assessment speak, but I think helping students understand that what they're doing is producing evidence of learning, that speaks to their kind of desire for concrete things. And I keep on making the connection to the work world and employment. I mean, it's not enough just to say you write well. It's not enough just to say, oh, I'm a what's the usual phrase? A go-getter, problem solver, whatever the platitudes are. You have to show that, and this is a tangible way of showing that. So I don't know. What are all of you doing with that kind of designating what goes in ePortfolio? How much latitude are you giving students with what they can include? Because that's a question I still haven't entirely seen myself.
Well, Jolanda and I have, we have a format they have to follow. I'll post it. I'll get there, I promise. Mine, it looks very similar, but some of the content is different. Some of Jolanda posts hers, some of the pieces are going to be a little bit different. But technically, for each section, for each category that we've given them, there are required pieces that they have to put in, and then there are pieces that are optional, or that they can choose on their own to put in, that have to go into those categories. And then one of the very last assignments is a video, but it's a reflection of the entire semester. So they have to create a video reflecting on their plan, the personal success plan, which the class is based off of. And so they have to reflect upon their entire first semester in college. And so we're going to provide questions for them to think, but they're going to answer those questions, and that's probably going to be a huge piece of the critical thinking. But they also have papers they have to upload and things like that. But a lot of it we're giving prompts for, so that they know what they should be answering and looking for. And then the pieces that they want to put in themselves, we can give example prompts or things to think about, but it may not be required to answer those exact questions. So we the class is the ePortfolio in our class. It's not if you want to take this product and put it in there, you can. It's the class. So we took our class and structured the e-portfolio as a part of the class. The video, the ending reflection is about 3 minutes, a 3-minute video. And, I mean, for my class, they can do YouTube or, I think you can do a Google Hangout, things like that. Jolanda's class, she's requiring them to go to, Career Services has a system called Interview Stream, and you can provide the questions ahead of time, and Career Services will videotape them for you, or ask them the questions for you, and they will videotape them, and they can take that video and upload it into their system. They normally use it to help with Skype interviews and mock interviews for students, but if you are an instructor and you want to provide the questions, they can ask those questions for you, and they can just answer those questions. So she's going to have them do that. I'm letting my class be a little more fluid with theirs. YouTube, Google Hangout, your cell phone, as long as it's visible.
Can you record on Hangout? Can that be recorded?
You can record Hangouts. Yeah, you can record Hangouts and then send out, and you can either embed it or you can send out the link for someone to click on the Hangout and view the Google Hangout. A lot of people do webinars over Hangouts.
Yeah, we do interviewing, maybe interviewing, but I didn't know you could
Yeah,
record what
you
they
can
do.
record. I've seen a couple of recorded ones. If I can't make the Hangout itself, they'll record it.
Gotcha, okay.
But yeah, so I'll post this. I don't think Jolanda's in there yet. So yeah, I'll post it if you're interested in it. But we have a flow. It's sort of, it's like I said, it's a part of the class. And pieces fall under certain categories.
Now, this is a 1 credit hour?
2.
2? Okay, okay. This sounds like such, it sounds like such an adolescent question. How many individual items of stuff are you asking them to put in the e-portfolio?
Well, some things, so for FFL in general, every FFL class, all the students have to do 3 critical reflections. It's up to the instructor what those topics are. So we took those 3 critical reflections and based it on one of the categories and said that's going to be one of the pieces that you're going to put into the e-portfolio. So they all have to do the critical reflections. Every student in any FFL class has to do a person success plan. So that's going to go in the e-portfolio. Another piece is an academic plan, but it's really having them look at their courses and talk about why are you taking these courses, what's the purpose. And then other things are things that, depending on who the instructor of the class is, you might have your students do. So I have my students do a resume and an informational interview every year. And so they're going to put that into the e-portfolio. So there are things that we've already been doing. We just made it a part of the e-portfolio. And so they'll have headers. We have educational goals, career goals, and then community and global engagement. So for FFL, we do the first year summer read, and we do for the QEP, and we also have them come in and do a workshop. That's a part of the e-portfolio. So we just took what we were already doing and we just built it to where instead of you turning in the paper through Blackboard, they can still do that piece so they can get the grade. But now your final project is to take all of those pieces and put it into the individual categories and make it appear nice in the e-portfolio. And so what we've done, a huge part of what we've done, we've modeled a lot of it after IUPUI and their individual, their personal development plans. All of their prompts are online. They're open for anybody to look at. But yeah, we modeled visually after IUPUI and how they do their e-portfolios. They introduced their e-portfolio program through their first year course. And then they also do it by major as well. So,
And they actually have been and continue to be kind of a model institution for a lot of these sorts of practices. And I know in undergraduate studies, a lot of attention has been paid to them to the point of actually bringing in experts from IUPUI because they are especially interested in these as tools for persistence and retention and all of those kinds of adjectival activities of students, and it's a very good place to start. You know, one of the things you point out too that I had not thought about as a use for e-portfolios. If you have a multi-section course that's taught by a number of instructors, such as CST 105, potentially 341 as well, depending on the number of sections we have, Pat, which is on the more advanced level, this would be a good way to kind of assure some degree of consistency across those sections, because structurally, in every section, you have a certain kind of assignment feeding in. So even though the individual instructors might be doing slightly different things, let's say in CST 105, they're all doing, say, a persuasive speech. Okay, all these persuasive speeches are, say, 5 to 8 minutes long, and it kind of assures that degree of accountability.
Yeah. Actually, some Jolanda students, their stuff is already up. My class, their original open welcome page is not due until Monday, but Jolanda's class, they've done some pretty cool things with creating their page. So if you want me to pull it up so you can see just what some students have done and the differences, but the similarities, I can pull it up for you. Because when you go to Google Sites and when you go click on Google Sites for anyone, if the student has made it open to anyone at uncg.edu, it's public, so you can see any of those. So, so a lot of the public health e-portfolios are there. There may be a nurse. I'm not sure if there's a nursing one. I saw one nursing student. I don't know from when, but some of Jolanda's students made theirs public, so you can see, and they look really good. I mean, now their welcome page, we told them to be creative. It was your page, your welcome page, your e-portfolio, pictures, quotes, things like that. But they all have the same categories, and they're all going to have the same pieces.
Can I ask you a quick question? This goes way back to the original. Are we looking through this study, or ultimately, a e-portfolio that's university-wide, UNCG-wide, or unit-wide, which is like college, or is it department-wide?
The suitably evasive response, all and none of the above. Well, here it depends. It depends on who's asking the question, honestly, Pat, because from the standpoint of the sponsors of the grant, the UNC General Administration, they're actually looking at this as a system-wide policy. Okay? And one, not the least reason why we are all over the map with our platforms is because I even said in the grant proposal that you are not going to have a single unified platform that is going to be suitable even within an individual institution. And one reason is that if a student winds up being an education major, they're going to task stream whether they like it or not, So from the general administration standpoint, they are constantly talking about this idea of bringing e-portfolios to scale, as they say. And ultimately, that scale would be the extrapolation of what we're doing to system-wide practice. I think that when you drill down into like the instructional usage, which is the concerns of the faculty and staff who are using these, the question is much more an issue of its use programmatically. It's interesting you mentioned public health. I just heard from them, and I had talked informally with people in that department that I know about e-portfolios. They also officially now have instituted an e-portfolio requirement. It's a relatively recent thing. I was told that students are actually given their choice of a couple of platforms. They had already done a fair amount of piloting with the Google Sites, and I believe they also, I want to say WordPress, but I don't think that's right. It might actually be Weebly. I'll have to check.
Yeah.
But we're going to actually have some folks from that department come in and share with us what they're doing.
The reason I ask this is because so many people I'm talking to say, well, we want to see what we all settle on. And I'm not sure of what my response is. Do what you want to do, and then we'll work it out. Or, okay, that's a great idea. Wait until we decide. Who's the we?
Yeah, well, that's something I'm constantly struggling with in my interactions with the general administration. Because even there, Catherine Stewart is kind of the overseer of all these projects. And She's a faculty member, a tenured faculty member. But there's this mindset of it's like you're window shopping in a store, and then you make your product decision, and it's a mutually exclusive type of process. You choose this, but not this. And I'm saying, well, first of all, given our institutional culture at UNCG, every unit and department operates so autonomously. I cannot imagine there being some sort of consensus on this. I mean, my gosh, we can't even decide on our gen ed requirements. The college has a world unto itself. This invented college additional requirement deal. So I think the more the concern is pedagogical, the narrower the forum of application becomes, right? So I think, for example, one of the things that we may be exploring in our department as a result of this is a combination of two things. E-portfolios, but in conjunction with a specific curricular issue, which is the viability of a capstone. And I think a number of departments are kind of in that situation.
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
so it's still a maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rather involved answer, but I think that it's a very difficult thing. I mean, it's going to be a disaster if the general administration just says, okay, we're using e-portfolios, here's what you're going to use. And in fact, even universities that have adopted a single e-portfolio platform type of system often find out that they'll do something like adopt, and Clemson is a case in point, which is generally considered like this national model for e-portfolios. Well, they used Google Sites, and then they found out, whoops, none of these public domain tools have any analytics capability whatsoever. So if you're using these for assessment and data gathering, you either have to find a commercial product that does this, and Taskstream and Education have powerful tools, but you pay for them. Or you have to construct it. And Clemson, being the engineering and technical kind of oriented university in South Carolina, fortunately they had the expertise locally to do that. Most campuses don't. We're pressed just to support Blackboard or Canvas, So it's an open question, but I think really the ultimate message to the general administration is, regardless of the platform, what does it take to get a bunch of people using e-portfolios in a reasonably consistent fashion? And frankly, I think our study is the best equipped to do this because it turns out we're the only ones that are testing multiple platforms. Everybody else has just kind of had this straight down the middle, inside the box approach of, well, we select our platform and then we test e-portfolios. But the problem with that methodologically is, are the results you getting artifacts of your platform, or are you actually measuring the e-portfolio experience? Because the platform isn't transparent. I mean, that affects the student experience of e-portfolios. It affects what can and can't be constructed. Yeah.
Okay.
But then another piece to that too is the opposite side of it is it depends on how it's going to be required. So if it's something where where we're saying every single student needs to have an e-portfolio and we're going to start with the class of 2016, then if you start out with the class of 2016 using e-portfolios, if every class they go to, they're using a different e-portfolio system, then that poses a problem.
Yes.
Unless,
Yes.
and then if you have, like for Virginia Tech, no, not Virginia Tech, IUPUI, for instance, the e-portfolio is introduced to you in your first year course, in your first year transition course. So they're all using the same platform. And so they utilize the e-portfolio throughout the rest of their 4 years at the institution. So they just build upon it every single year under the same categories, but just within their majors and whatnot. But so, you gotta,
It's
it's a toss-up. It depends on how you introduce it, and then it depends on who you're introducing it to. So if it's a campus-wide initiative and you're only going to introduce it to this first year and then they're going to use it forever, then that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Although, the other issue is if they're using multiple platforms, I think it has to be explained to them that's the portability of taking that data and putting it into another platform. That to me is also, because let's say you're using Google and we're using Weebly, can they take that information and put it into?
Mm-hmm.
And according to Weebly, you can. It just says change over to. So.
Yeah. I mean, and for certain campuses, their first year course is required for all students.
Mhm.
So that's another piece that if they all have to have that one, that they all start with that, then do you want them to change to another system based on the different classes they go to?
Mhm.
Because that class or that major wants to use a certain portfolio platform. So.
And of course, that's that whole idea of just how longitudinal you want that e-portfolio to be. IUPUI for an institution its size has an amazing degree of like universal implementation and buy-in of certain types of curricular and pedagogical practices. And so there, it's just sort of this buy-in culturally of, well, if you're teaching a course here, naturally your course will feed into the construction of this e-portfolio. Here, it might be easier for that to begin paradoxically. I mean, this does create some problems. I'd love to, I think if you're going to use an e-portfolio, students need to be exposed to it as soon as possible, and all the research indicates, that's how you get students to do a good one. We may find we kind of approach this backwards at UNCG from a practical standpoint, because individual departments may find that, well, we can at least kind of centralize our practices, Then probably your entry point to e-portfolios, if they have not gotten it through FFL or some other early curricular experience, would be like their first gateway course into the major. You look at your major core, and maybe you might say, like, we have 4 core courses in the major. You might say, okay, every one of those 4 courses will give students a thorough exposure to e-portfolios. And you may say that those 4 courses become the touchstones for the e-portfolio construction, and leave it at that until you decide how you want to expand it later. So maybe start from whatever uniform areas there are in your curriculum, because you can kind of control that, and then work out from there, eventually winding up at a capstone if you have it.
Is that Indiana University?
It is.
The-
Lindsay, shall we do the recitation of the full name? Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis.
Oh, okay, because I've been there, and so I was wondering.
Short IP.
Have you been to Indiana? Have you been to Indianapolis? Have you been to Purdue? Have you been?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Indianapolis. No, I wasn't. I was in Indiana.
See? See how hard that is?
I have a friend who completed an LM program through UPUI, and she was just absolutely happy.
Yeah.
Most person I've ever heard most happy with their college experience ever was.
And
What was it about it?
She said the professors were amazingly engaged. The course material was super interesting.
Yeah.
She loved that it was online, and yet she still felt engaged with her professors.
Okay, I'm sorry. I looked at
No,
this
yeah, slight tangent, but yeah, they're fantastic from what I hear.
yeah, and of course everybody who's kind of familiar with the organization and everybody who works there calls it UEPUI. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Now I remember.
This maybe,
Mhm.
sorry, I was just gonna say this, maybe backing up a little bit, but I have an assignment that contrasts with y'all's amazing, wonderful, sounds like super organized assignment, because you were asking how do we give people our guidelines and stuff like that, and I'm hearing this going, wow, y'all are doing it really right, and I'm starting to understand now why we've been getting, frankly, some of the crap that we've been getting in our portfolio. So if we have them in, I can provide a contrast to this really great assignment we've been hearing about in the BLS program. Our guidelines, our guidelines for the e-portfolio have been, for this first part of the assignment, you should select 5 at least items that you feel represent both your best work in the BLS SSC program, but that also represent the breadth and depth of your studies. In other words, items that provide information about the variety of information and subjects that you have studied as part of your degree program. You will also need to draft the preface to your portfolio. And then in the preface, we ask them to include a list of the assignments that they include in the class they're from. We ask them to identify their concentration, what they've learned in the SSC program, and talk a little bit about how the social sciences are connected, and talk about how each item represents what they've learned. And that's it.
Well, it's not terrible.
Clearly.
Well, I actually could,
But
please share that on the discussion board, because there's some phrasing
I'll
there
be
that's
frank,
really
I'm doing
good.
my homework while we've been discussing.
Yeah.
I think there's
Just like
some
we
real,
have.
I think it's capturing the
But-
same thing they're
Mhm.
doing. I think it may be just the wording and the explanation of the
And I
assignment.
think part of it is that you guys are used to doing FFL, you're done incoming students, and so you're very, you know, you do this, and it sounds very super structured. And I think something that we forgot when we were writing SSC 400 is the SSC program is an online degree completion program, and we have some super smart cookies in there. But a lot of them haven't been in college in a long time as a degree completion program. And so I think we were thinking about in terms of, 400 level capstone students, we can tell them, put together a portfolio and they will make it so. And some of them have been amazing and some of them have not been so amazing. So I'm getting a lot better ideas about how we can prop up this process for them. So thank you, which I guess is why we're doing this. But yeah, I was sitting here looking at my assignment going, that's kind of horrifying now. But it's different than
there.
traditional
I mean,
some of
400
it's
It's a
students.
400.
Well, that's the whole thing,
But
you know.
it's 400 level students who potentially, I mean, because the
Mhm.
way the SSC program is structured, depending on how many credits they come in with,
Sure.
they can
Right.
be in and out in 2 semesters.
Sure.
And they certainly haven't,
Yeah.
yeah,
Haven't got the
baked.
depth of it.
Right.
They haven't baked like your traditional 400 level students on campus, so.
Yeah.
I think a huge part of what we do too is foundational, so like we try to make sure that we teach them things that are gonna help them in their
Mhm.
classes.
Yeah, I
Because we do a
love-
lot of deprogramming, unfortunately, from what they learned in K through 12. I mean, so we have to like break down a lot of stuff, and so we try to start and say, like a lot of times I have a conversation in class about, this is how we're gonna do things in this class. When you go to your other classes, this
Yeah.
is what they're gonna
Yeah.
expect of you. Otherwise, it would just, yeah. So yeah,
I
we're
wish
a
we
little
could
more
send our
structured.
students through some kind of FFL class the
Well,
first
we-
semester, but
Yeah.
yeah, I know I was in a meeting yesterday about orientation for online students and, because, you know, they're smart and they're motivated, but they don't have a lot of the kind of college basics that,
We keep going around on that
yeah,
conversation.
like I said, we were talking about orientation.
I do think
yesterday,
though,
too.
regardless of where you are, you're going to always get some awesome things. You're also going to get middle, and you're also, it's, you know, it's the bell curve. There's some stuff I see coming, I think, I don't think you got it. But then there's others that say, damn, you got it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that bell curve you're dealing with
Fair
too.
enough, but I don't know, sometimes
Yeah, we
we'll
all.
see. We'll see if I can make this process a little bit better for them this fall, because since we're switching platforms, I'm taking the opportunity to, you know, improve the assignments, and it's good, because we pre-wrote this class 2 years ago now. Me and Jill done, I don't know how many have done with Jill. It's because it's a class in a box, it's the same class over and over and over again, because that's a lot of what we do with the online degree completion programs. And yeah, it's definitely getting to the point where we need to unbox it a little bit, and now we've had a couple of iterations, and I think this process is one of those things we need to fix up a little bit.
What platform are you using now? 'Cause y'all were doing Blackboard, right?
We were doing the Blackboard portfolios, because we had our meeting last spring where I secured Blackboard portfolios and said we don't want students. I picked Google Sites,
Google Sites.
yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah,
Bob kind of loosened the reins a little bit on that?
yeah, I emailed Bob and I said, you know, hey, what do you, I'd like to use
Okay,
Google Sites,
good,
but I can
good.
do something else if you want. He said, no, we're switching anyway,
Oh,
we're
good.
not keeping Blackboard, so do what you want.
Okay, because I must have hit him at a real, you know, rigid mood point or something. But
The boss is
but
like
it
that.
is mixed a bit, because I know that Bob and Matt McKinnon, who are going to be piping in here remotely during the semester, because he teaches from Peoria and has been using Blackboard e-portfolios for some time. They are part of the Canvas pilot now. And Bob said that they are
I don't know how I
actually,
missed out on that, but
well, I mean,
Yeah.
Bob said that apparently Canvas does have an e-portfolio feature, and that's going to be a very, very interesting discussion we have, because after they have gone through most of the semester, I'm going to find a way for us to have Bob kind of have a discussion of, well, what is he finding out with that? What can it offer us, and what doesn't? Who knows? It may have implications for people already using e-portfolios. One thing we are definitely going to be able to learn from the BLS program, and Chantel, if you could make a note of this, it would be great. Where they have a particular strength is on the back end with the assessment piece, because their e-portfolios are externally reviewed, if you will. There's an entire committee that reviews these e-portfolios, a committee of faculty that reviews them, and it's a multidisciplinary committee. And one of the things that we can get from them, and I keep on, this crosses my mind, but now that you set it in stone, Chantel, I'll actually follow through with it. because now you can bug me about it, is pulling in their rubric and even some members of those evaluation committees. I know Chris Poulos has been doing that for a while, and talk about the things that they look for in e-portfolios from an assessment standpoint.
I'll be honest, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, well, and it's a real challenge, and I think that hearing some of the things they are, have to make compromises on, or what they would like to have but don't, could help us.
Well, the reason I say this, because as a person who does 400, most semesters have been 400 now. I did it last fall, Joel did it last spring. We still fall back and forth. Anyway, I'll get the evaluations on the portfolios, and even with the same rubric, they're all over the place. I get one member of the committee who says that this paper is the perfect embodiment of critical thinking, and I believe the student's going to go far, and I'll get another person looking at the same paper, the same student who says, I think this is a terrible paper, and this person could have rubbed two thoughts together with a, and even
Just
with
like
the
it
same
is in
rubric and the same.
traditional.
I know. Well,
It's so
and
frustrating,
well,
so
see-
I'm looking forward to getting them involved and
Yeah.
getting them.
see, that's a really important point, because one of the things that I'm concerned about, and we're going to generate some data to investigate this this semester. There's all this talk about using e-portfolios as a gateway to assessment via the AAC and U value rubrics, right? And the AAC and U presents these value rubrics as, these like scientifically validated instruments and all that. And anybody who's ever done this kind of research and construction of these instruments, like the National Communication Association's Competent Communicator evaluation tool, which I was part of the beta group that tested that. What they did with the NCA rubric is they just kept on reducing the number of categories until they got a 95% plus intercoder reliability, okay? Which ain't hard to do when you have like 3 categories, with a 2-value assessment on each, right? So meet standard, doesn't meet standard. The AAC and U rubrics have an excellent inter-rater reliability, but that's only a piece of the real issue with any of these assessment tools, which is the validity issue, okay? So inter-rater reliability is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for validity of the instrument. And so it remains to be seen how that pans out, and we're going to be starting on that work very soon. I want to get the A&T cohort kind of up to speed before we all start doing that, and that's going to be all online, so rest assured we're not going to have to multiply the face-to-face meetings. The other thing that's particularly important, I think I need to oil my belt, which keeps on squeaking against this chair. General guidelines for the e-portfolio construction, and Brandy's already well, she's fixed it. Let's move on. but in particular, there, actually, I can kind of combine 2 and 3 to save us time. One of the real issues here is, soon I'm going to be publishing on their course site. Okay, these are specifics of the e-portfolio itself, and I'm going to make it platform neutral just in case we have to do a platform switch or something like that. And by the way, that's something to think about too. To save yourself agony later on, you might want to kind of give a read to your instructions to verify that they're not indigenous just to the platform you're using. So for example, let's say you're using Google Sites now. If you become really disenchanted with that, or if Google capriciously changes their terms of service and it no longer has the same features, you can use your same guidelines if you go over to WordPress or if you go over to Weebly or what have you. That's just something to consider. And I know Brenta and I are considering that anyway, because right now we're just kind of shrugging our shoulders with TaskStream, which is basically saying, well, we can do whatever you want. And it's like, okay, but we know what we want with our assignments, but I have no idea what you're talking about with these technicalities in the industry, the workflow, and all that. I don't know. Maybe when we put our heads together, we can figure that out.
We need to chat
I
because
know.
my meeting got canceled this week and pushed out to next week.
Well, actually, mine was inadvertently canceled because I was only notified of the web link 8 minutes before the scheduled time, so I had already rescheduled. I was doing other activities, and I'm just, anyway, that's the TaskStream issue that we don't need to share with everyone. But The other interesting question too is aside from the general guidelines for the e-portfolio, and particularly looking in Bonnie's direction here, those of you who have a lot of experience kind of helping students build e-portfolios and looking at e-portfolios, is this question of framing the work products. Because what I'm hoping these students will, I mean, frankly, there's no value added if a student is just putting the work products in. So what kinds of what kinds of prompts maybe are you giving students to talk about each of these work products? How are they framing them in the e-portfolio? And actually, I have a final synthesis assignment just like Brandy was talking about, but mine's written instead of a video. It's a self-reflection on learning. So at least with a synthesis at the end, that can just go in the guidelines of track your intellectual development on on each level of the rubric. Prove that you deserve that 4. In each of those categories. But for the individual pieces,
Yeah,
that's an
something
open
I was thinking
question.
about earlier when she was talking about with you were talking about the pieces that you'd selected or the assignment that you had and what you wound up with in that package is in business when we put together the e-portfolios, there's a lot of latitude on what the student gets to select and build that package. And there may be 20 things that we've all worked on, but for this particular job or this particular position, then there'll be certain selected elements that are repackaged or reframed or whatever. And I think Duke, isn't it, that sends their packages out, their e-portfolios out to external professionals in the field.
Oh, right.
And they don't assess, they just give feedback on it. They don't, the instructors don't necessarily grade or assign a grade based on that feedback, but they'd be foolish not to take those comments constructively, as would the students. So that, to me, I think is a creative way to use the product itself and to get different ways of framing those. How much latitude you give to the student or to the instructor to say this is part of the final package, or this is what the package should look like, or the package should have these elements.
And I think that's the reality of the world that we're all in. It's so multiple that we can't put everything in it. There's certain things that are even confidential that shouldn't go into.
Right.
So I think is our goal to have something that's presentable. It depends, I guess, on what year, because you've got a very different goal than I do. And so it's hard.
Yeah, and that's an open question.
This is the messiness we're dealing with.
It is. Well, particularly because we're not doing these. I think one of the biggest challenges with that is that this is not a long-term implementation plan. It's a pilot test, and I think some of these things would just work themselves out if this were a programmatic effort. Now, actually, on campus, we might have that laboratory in progress, because if you'll notice that we in the kind of new additions of names and people involved with the project, we have Sarah Creevy in the Honors College. And Honors College is interesting because they can operate almost as an independent laboratory for these sorts of initiatives. So they're using this in their Honors Colloquium, which is their version of FFL. And because that honors curriculum is, there's a lot of variability, but there are specific kinds of criteria when you combine disciplinary honors with those honors seminars that they take during their first year, kind of as a cohort, more or less. That could be a laboratory for testing some of these things. But part of the issue here, like with me, I've got these students who are approaching the end of their majors. A few sophomores, overwhelmingly juniors and seniors. And the problem I'm having, honestly, I can already anticipate it, is selling them on the value of the e-portfolios, because it's almost too late.
Yeah, that's...
They're going to put stuff in there from this class. There's no follow-up in the department unless they happen to take, one of your courses later. There's no systematic follow-up in the department. There's no capstone for assuring that it's all kind of neatly tied up and there's closure. And I still don't think that we've instilled the culture of how valuable this can be professionally. I think that the professional schools have a real edge in that area anyway.
And I think that is the challenge, because they see I think you do fabulous, but they perceive it as an exercise, whereas I'm trying to
Yeah.
present it as a professional
Yeah.
portfolio. So I think there is the perception, and that's something you can't get away with
Yeah.
unless you start in the beginning and carry it through. Then they see it.
And,
as a
and frankly, they're
capstone.
right.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna be honest with them and say, this is a project for us to help assess your learning. I mean, I haven't gone in, and not that they would really understand all the details anyway, I haven't gone into, we're part of a grant project, this, that, and the other. And aside from just not wishing to confuse them with stuff and burden them with that, I also don't want them to feel like they're guinea pigs,
Right.
Because I'm really doing this because I'm hoping that it will help them process their learning, Because frankly, under the definition of the grant, it doesn't really matter whether I personally participate or not, But, it seemed to be an appropriate type of educational experience.
Well, like being able to understand the value of a portfolio.
And the audience too, I think, is
Yeah.
challenging with
Yeah.
our campus, I'm just preaching to the choir with communication people and
Yeah.
audience, but we've got, 2+2, we've got transfers, we've got all this, it's such a melange of different kinds of students that it's hard to find that argument that works with somebody that transfers here for the final year.
Mhm.
I think that, but I think that looking at what everybody's doing, I see something going forward. Now I've loaded up their syllabus so much, I'm afraid, because I love the idea of Duke, sending it outside and getting some feedback on it from a professional, which I would institute next semester. This semester, if I put that on the plate too, it's going to be like, oh, dear God. I'll
Right,
drop
I know.
it. So, but I'll try it and see how it works. But I like that a lot. I think that's a great idea. And I also, from Debbie, what we did last year is had seniors, my PR class, look at an English 101's portfolio and just gave them some feedback. And so we could even do it internally.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be externally.
It's not we're going to be doing it internally with, instructor to instructor with each other's students'
Right.
e-portfolios, because that's one of the ways that we're going to kind of determine how universally we can apply the rubrics. It may even be that some platforms work better with these
Yeah.
AC new rubrics than others, But, that external validation is quite interesting. Also gives possibly something, it gives a kind of a professional advisory
Gives a real
board something to
feel
do.
it. It really
I
does.
like that.
This will work,
Yeah.
this one.
I found an article on emerging tech. I just did a Google search because I wanted them to read something about ePortfolio, so it just wasn't coming from me. So there was this random article that was called "Are ePortfolios Still Relevant?" And it was speaking to the student in a sense. But it was a really quick, short article, but it was just talking about the importance of ePortfolios and why it's still relevant and how they could use it. And I just sent it to them and said, read this before.
Really?
They read it, they were supposed to read it now, whether or not they read it.
Yeah,
or not.
well,
But they were supposed to read it before Armando came in to do the Google Sites presentation.
Okay.
And then on the day that he did that, this is when they got this whole thing here.
Could you send me or Chantel the link to that
Yeah,
article, or-
and there were,
or if it's a
there were 3
PDF?
other links too, because I forwarded them to Jolanda. It was about how to, as a professor, as an instructor, how to utilize them. And there was one about Google Sites. Yeah, I just did a quick Google search. But Emerging Tech has a lot of really good things about ePortfolios. It's emergingtech.com. I just came across it. But yeah, I'll send that.
But the challenge I'm having is something that is written for the students. I mean, I've got all the scholarly articles anybody can shake a stick at, but that's not going to help.
Yeah, it was just like a blog post. Well, it wasn't a blog post. It was more, Emerging Tech is like, it's like a educational, technology website, and so it was just a quick post about are ePortfolios still relevant, and then they had a quick post about using Google Sites for ePortfolios and how to, as an instructor, how do you implement ePortfolios in the class, things like that. So yeah, and I mean it was very in layman's terms for students to read and be like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
You
That's
know.
interesting, is the question is, are they still relevant? And we're just
And,
emerging
well,
into the
yeah, I know,
relevance of it.
well,
Yeah.
That I found very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was
What's-
interesting, too.
What's beyond e-portfolios?
Yeah, yeah.
What is? I don't
Yeah.
know.
They had a lot of stuff on there too. So I was like, oh, they're so relevant. And I think, honestly, I think it was written a couple of years ago.
well,
So,
actually,
yeah.
well,
Classic.
What is
But it was
beyond?
so
UNCG
relevant,
always
so-
on the cutting edge.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
so
What is
relevant.
beyond
Yeah.
e-portfolios?
Well, you know what, I tell you, actually, if you want an anticipation of what's beyond e-portfolios, it's incredibly creepy, is involuntary e-portfolios. And that is, rather than students constructing their own e-portfolios, well, it's already started in a
We just
way.
keep stuff for them.
And that is when these interviewers ask for passwords to social media sites and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, right? And unfortunately, you know, the court rulings seem to be that prospective employers can do whatever they want. But what is eventually going to be is an automated system where if somebody's applying for a job, you have some sort, and I'm sure the business in this will be established, if it isn't already, where you contract with this company and you give the basic data from their resume, maybe ask them for their social security number or something like that, and then it feeds to you some type of classification of their activities, okay? So for example, how, and this can get incredibly detailed, right? Such as list of friends on social media, things like
They
that.
already have that capability.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And even things such as time spent on certain websites and all of that. So I think
the
what
first
we're,
thing they do.
I think what we're moving toward is e-portfolios are rendered irrelevant because they're just going to be seen as image management tools and they don't reveal the real person.
Well, what they're going to do is just, each person's going to have their own drone, and they're going to have to drone
Yeah.
their stuff in.
Yeah, they'll have a UPC
They're going to drone
code.
their.
Yeah,